now he's the junior senator for New Jersey. We're thrilled to have him join us to give us an update. He's been up all night. Let's welcome Senator Andy Kim to the show. Sir, welcome to the show. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
How's your sleep?
I look forward to it one day soon, but right now, we got to do everything we can to stop this bill. I mean, this bill is going to do generational harm, generational damage to the generation that my 7-year-old and my 9-year-old growing up in. So we got to give it everything we got.
It's not an exaggeration to say this bill will very likely actually kill Americans, won't it?
Well, look, this is something that's going to kick about 16 million Americans off of their health care. When you think about who's on Medicaid, I mean, people with disabilities, with 15 million Americans with disabilities on Medicaid. You got seniors that have significant problems that need to be able to have long-term care nursing homes. So, I mean, this is just devastating. It's literally going after the Americans that need care the most.
Yeah.
And not to mention the food assistance cuts, the SNAP. I mean, like literally, we got millions of kids in this country they're just, here in DC, they call it food insecurity. That's just a bureaucratic way of saying they're hungry. Like people are hungry in America right now. And it just like the idea that they want to take away from them. And again, as you said, for what cause? It's not about trying to bring down the deficit. It's about
No.
trying to give people who are so wealthy, they have their own space program, to give those types of folks a tax cut, and I just find that to be despicable.
It does. And you're talking 17 million Americans will be left uninsured. I've read something like $3.9 trillion in debt in 10 years. ICE, as I mentioned, the lost lobby. How does this help anyone when you're talking about millions of Americans being kicked off the healthcare that they desperately need in this country?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's not something that they can justify or explain. I was on the floor of the Senate yesterday, yeah, as we were approaching midnight, and you see JD Vance and a bunch of senators walk back in, and they're high-fiving each other, basically because they struck some deal. What they are going on about there last night, close to midnight. It wasn't about pulling this back from the brink. It was about how do they make the cuts even steeper. I mean, that's literally what they were going at. This bill coming out of the Senate is even worse than what's in that passed through the
Right.
House of Representatives, right? So
Yeah.
if they really cared about people with healthcare, they could have just gone with that House bill as a baseline. But no, they're like, no, look, like hold my beer. We're gonna try to take it up a notch. And I just like I just it hurts my heart to think about it. And you can tell that they know that it does damage because some of my colleagues, they're trying to say, hey, look, can we get some more for Alaska? Can we try to put in
Yeah.
stuff to be able to help with rural hospitals because we're concerned? So you can tell that they know the math, but
Right.
they're looking at, hey, look, what if I take care of this or that? Maybe I can get to a yes. And it's frustrating to just see with my own eyes, and I can't imagine just the American people seeing this very much. Just how do you trust this process? How do you trust these people that are elected to represent us? So it's very dispiriting. And but again, like I said, I'm going to do everything I can to be able to stop this in the Senate. If it passes the Senate, I'm going to do everything I can to be able to stop it in the House of Representatives because it'll go back there after the Senate.
And on that note, I heard that you've been doing town halls, in your states, New Jersey. You've been going to Republican House districts and having town halls about the bill, and which I think is just a brilliant tactic to remind the voters that represent. I mean, look, House member districts are smaller. It's we often say that a House representative district is a local job on steroids, right? To put pressure on them or realize and make sure they understand the damage will happen in their own districts. Have you been talking
Yeah,
about that?
because
What are
look,
you
when you
hearing?
show up in a district that's represented by a Republican, you want to know something? Like they got seniors too. They got
Yep.
people with disabilities too. They got
Yep.
people who are down on their luck and need a help to be able to get back on their feet. The Republicans are trying to make it sound like these are just a bunch of lazy people that are just mooching off the American people. That's not the case.
No.
And this is just a lot of people that are really struggling at this time at a moment we have the greatest amount of inequality in our nation's history. As you mentioned, like we got, the Amazon founder having his wedding while we got, people struggling in this country. It's really tough. Like the amount of real extreme poverty that I've witnessed in my time in Congress in my home state. It's just people are just trying to make ends meet, and just the idea that you're taking away from them to be able to provide to the Elon Musks of the world is just cruel. So I do think people we need to keep that pressure on. I mean, they are feeling. I hear from
Oh
my
yeah.
colleagues. They are hearing from their constituents. So for everybody out there, please make sure you're making the noise. Make sure that you're flagging this and raising your concerns. And in particular, I'll say people that are in small businesses, people that are, working hard, people that can share their stories about what this would mean to them, especially when this president's already raised prices with the tariffs and other things.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I want to bring before I let you go too is I think a lot of people are under the myth that there's this myth that when you say you're going to cut healthcare from 17 million people, it's just going to affect those 17 million. That's a huge number. But I read from the American Association of Healthcare says that they surveyed nursing homes, and half of nursing homes plan say that under this bill they'll have to cut their staff, and a staggering 1/4 of all nursing homes in America say it will bankrupt them. So when it's not just Medicare and Medicaid recipients that are going to suffer, that's what props up a lot of rural hospitals and
Yeah.
almost all of our nursing home rooms, isn't it? I mean, this is going to have a devastating impact far beyond the 17 million that get their healthcare directly, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I talked with the hospital leader in New Jersey, and they said that because Medicaid reimbursements are such a huge part of their revenue, they're not sure their hospital can stay open. I mean, that'll affect
Jesus.
everybody. And that's why, we see, potential decimation of rural hospitals around this country, but it's not just rural hospitals either, and plus, beyond just the level of care, it's going to increase all of our costs. All of our
Yeah.
prices are going to go up as we see more and more people go into the emergency room rather than going for preventative care and another, somebody pays for that. All of us pay for that. And so, this is just a real lose 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 on so many different fronts. And again, you always have to kind of keep in mind, why are they doing this? And it's heartbreaking to sort of see, just how devastating this is. As I said earlier, this is the most dangerous piece of legislation I've ever seen in my time in Congress so far, and which is why we need to make sure we're sounding the alarm. And as someone who ran in 2017, I remember, John McCain's thumb was saving the Affordable Care Act. I still believe we could have another one of those John McCain moments, but it takes courage, which is unfortunately something very scarce in politics these days.
It does. And so a lot of people I know, I've heard from a lot of folks who are really scared and they're worried. They think it's done. That's a done deal. It's not a done deal yet. So I guess last question, sir, is what's next? And then more importantly, what can our viewers do to help?
Yeah, look, right now, what you're going to see unfold over the next few hours and potentially days here in the Senate is we're going to start up the debate probably later on today and have a process called Votorama. Don't get
Hmm.
distracted by its name. It just means that we're going to be trying to use a bunch of amendments into the night to try to slow this process down, but also highlight the problems. For instance, my father is somebody who's unfortunately slipping into dementia, somebody who's had a lot of health problems, physical health problems. I raised in a previous Votorama about how this kind of legislation is gutting caregivers, people who are taking care of, our loved ones. That's my personal story about my worry about my father and whether or not he can get the care that he needs in a way that I can't be able to provide because he needs real medical help. I hope
Yeah.
others share your own personal views. We got to make sure we're not the Republicans are not just hiding behind the statistics. Make it personal. Let people know why it is that you care. And I think that that's what we need to do to try to stop it. And if we're not able to in the Senate, we try to stop in the House. And God forbid they pass it through the House and it's signed into law. We have to hold every single one of them accountable for that. And I say that as someone who
Relentlessly.
beat a Republican who tried to gut the
Hmm.
Affordable Care Act back in 2018. We need to make sure that we flip and we get real gavels into people who want to protect our care.
Well, it's a huge fight. We appreciate you being in the fight, sir, and thanks for taking. I know you're busy and sleepless, and taking time for us. We'll make sure more people hear. Thanks, and all we can say, like I've said, told you every time I've ever talked to you, is thanks and keep up the fight.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
See you soon, sir.